Good Wednesday morning. Now, it may look like I'm overdressed this morning. Actually, weather in Sacramento is pretty bizarre. It was 90 something yesterday in our backyard, or day before yesterday, excuse me. And now it's darn right chilly. Uh, I've had a I've been having trouble with my knee. It's sort of a common thing when you're over 30 like myself. Um, but I took a walk anyway this morning, but it was pretty slow and I kind of hobbled my way. But it's chilly out there, and I decided uh, rather than look cool and summery, which I should be at this time, I just wanted to be comfortable. So I've dressed like that. I hope you don't mind. I do have sweatpants on too, in case you were wondering what's going on down there. Anyway, it's Passover season, and uh, I've been lucky over the years and honored over the years to be the guest uh, at this time of year for Seder, and I always enjoy the ceremony. I enjoy going out to eat and stuffing myself with spicy, goody stuff. So it's not really you want to come to the house for dinner, what's this bone and and herbs about. But it's so beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, and the family. Um, the star of the family of the whole ceremony is the youngest child, and the youngest child asks the question, why do we do this? There's set things they say, and then the father tells the Passover story, and it's one most of us are familiar with. It's sort of an archetypal, we're all sort of hardwired to resonate with this story of bondage and liberation. Um, Indeed, truly, it's something that is almost hardwired in us to resonate to. If you've been lucky enough to see the Cecil B. DeMille film, 1955 or 56 or something like that, The Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston. Charlton Heston plays Moses, and John Carradine plays Aaron, his brother-in-law. Now, if you read the story, if you read in Exodus, um, Aaron he's the magician. Okay, it's Aaron's rod that Moses uses. So Aaron is the magician. Not only that, but Moses stuttered. Okay, uh, and Aaron spoke for him because Aaron was had a voice like John Carradine, and so Moses did all the talking. In the movie, they didn't stress the fact that Moses was not really good with words. Um, but John Carradine played Aaron. Just so it was Aaron that laid down his rod that swallowed up the Egyptian magicians, snakes and stuff like that. It's a very interesting story and well worth commemorating on all sorts of levels. As as a sort of a late adolescent and young man, uh, I pretty much consider myself an atheist, but I resonated with the Passover story, and I resonated with Judaism general because of the liberation aspect of it. Okay, because I was very into liberation theology, if you will, and social justice and things like that. And we're all aware of the troubles that are going on in the Middle East, and we're all, I'm sure, most of us are saddened at the whole affair, and we see an echo of the story, but the subject characters, in a sense, are acting it out in reverse. And I think it's important for us to remember that there is a big difference between history and Bible history. Both of them have their place. But it can be very, very dangerous and deleterious, I guess, to one's mental health to confuse one with the other. And when it becomes political reality backed by military reality, backed by real estate reality, backed by, well, it becomes a very unwholesome, unhealthy situation. I wrote a little bit about Bible history and empirical history, and I'm going to share a little bit with you today. I'm sure I've shared it with you in other contexts. Let's start with the place and time everyone seems to agree upon. There's little debate between secular historians and Bible scholars concerning the existence and the vitality of Judaism as practiced in Palestine during the 1st century BCE. Okay, before the Christian era. Okay, 1st century. So 1st century BCE would be like going from 0 to 100 BC. There's no debate about that. There's plenty of empirical evidence. Little debate between secular historians and Bible scholars concerning the existence and vitality of Judaism as practiced in Palestine during the 1st century BCE through most of the 1st century CE. Okay, there's a 200-year period, and there's a 0 year right in between. There's no debate between that. Okay. No credible historian dares presume to deny the existence of King Herod the Great. Now, he ruled from 73 to 74-ish BCE. No one dares to deny the existence of King Herod because we got all this Roman stuff, Roman corroborating evidence, or his magnificent temple in Jerusalem, or the priesthood that administered the sacrifices, or the existence and influence of cults and sects such as the Sadducees, Pharisees, and Essenes, all of whom revered a number of scriptural texts. that defined their view of Judaism and dictated in exacting detail divine laws and codes of behavior of this magnificent religion. Foremost among these texts, and there are many more than probably any of us realize, but foremost among these are 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, the Pentateuch, five Teuchs. Books that through their narrative relate the history of the universe, humankind, and the children of Israel. And that's Israel's the name of a man. Children of Israel refers to his descendants, not a plot of land. Tradition holds that the Pentateuch was written by Moses himself around 1280 to 1250 BCE. Okay, that's 1,280 years before the Christian era, when many Bible scholars compute the dates of the Exodus from Egypt. So Bible scholars computed the Exodus from Egypt at around 1280 BC. And that his 5 books were part of the mysterious contents of the powerful and dangerous Ark of the Covenant. Let's look briefly at these 5 books of Moses and try to get a sense of what they are, who wrote them, and where biblical history ends and objective history begins. Genesis begins with the creation story of the world and humankind. It plots our family tree and the great events that link God to his people. From Adam and Eve and the fall of man, through Noah and the great flood, through Abraham, who institutes penis mutilation to distinguish his family and people, and his sons, Ishmael, a father of the Arabs, and Isaac, father of the Jews. Through Isaac's twin sons, Esau, who the Bible tells us God hated before he was born, and Jacob, who God loved and later renamed Israel. Then comes Joseph, the son of Jacob, Israel, who after being sold into slavery by his jealous brothers really showed them all by making it very big in Egypt. Joseph then, in an act of gracious magnanimity, brings Israel, his father, and his entire family, the children of Israel, to the land of the Pharaoh to escape a terrible famine. The book of Exodus continues with the adventures of Israel's family in Egypt. For a while, things are wonderful. Nourished on Egypt's abundance, the 70 odd children of Israel multiply exuberantly and in a few generations become a ponderous population. After a few lean years of famine in the area, they actually become a serious economic burden upon Egypt's dwindling resources. In a ruthless pogrom, a new Pharaoh who never knew Joseph orders the firstborn Hebrew males to be slain. I believe it was a population control experiment. The mother of baby Moses places him in a basket and sets it afloat on the river Nile near where Pharaoh's daughter is bathing. She finds the baby and raises it as her own. Moses, like Joseph many years earlier, became a prince of Egypt. Moses' story is one of high drama and excitement. And I got to admit, Charlton Heston will always be Moses to me. He's the best. Okay. But I digress. He discovers his true identity, kills an Egyptian, is banished to the wilderness and has a close encounter with God, and is given magical powers that bring plagues and curses upon Egypt, including the deaths of all Egyptian firstborn males. Yeah, take that. Moses is eventually allowed to take the children of Israel out of Egypt. In the next 3 books, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Moses leads the children of Israel for 40 years of wandering in the tiny wilderness and raiding towns and villages. During this time, he receives the 10 Commandments, builds the Ark of the Covenant and a portable tabernacle to put it in. He puts to death a number of wrong-thinking members of the congregation, writes his memoirs, the Pentateuch, codifies laws and ordinance, and institutes the forms and customs of sacrificial worship that must be observed by the people in order to please God. Finally, after a generation of nomadic existence, Moses shows the children of Israel where God wants them to slaughter the natives and settle down, more or less the area generally known as Palestine. The book of Joshua follows the Pentateuch and continues the adventures of the children of Israel, now identified as a loose confederation of 12 tribes, as they conquer and settle the promised land. But it is the 5 books of Moses that first define Jewish identity as a people, as a culture, and as a religious entity. Other books of the Old Testament, revered by both Christians and Jews, continue the story of life in the Promised Land, how the children of Israel were ruled for a time by a series of judges, and how a great king, Saul, eventually rose from among them to unite them politically. Saul was succeeded by David, then Solomon, then a string of largely despicable minor kings who would disunite the nation until it fell prey to a series of conquests. The worst of these conquests and dispersals was delivered by Nebuchadnezzar, whose armies destroyed the Temple of Solomon and took the residents of Judah into bondage in Babylon. These books go on to tell the story so familiar to York Rite and Scottish Rite Masons, a story that has an uncanny number of parallels to the story of Moses and the Exodus from Egypt. Only in this case, the Exodus is from Babylon. Here we learn that after 70 years of captivity, the children of Israel were allowed to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple of their God and dwell once again in their own land. Unfortunately, after only 2 generations, the residents of Palestine had no idea who these returnees were. They resented them as invaders and foreign occupiers. The prophet Nehemiah and the highly influential scribe Ezra appeared to have been instrumental in arranging, kind of diplomatically arranging, the return of the children of Israel to Palestine. They insisted that it was vitally important that the temple be rebuilt so as to re-establish their cultural identity in the region. According to both the Bible and Masonic traditions, excavators and workmen had to work with a shovel in one hand and a sword in the other to fight off the disgruntled locals whose neighborly requests to be part of the building project, and this is in Scripture, whose neighborly requests to be part of the building project had been rudely rejected by the returnees. Now, we have to admit that these returnees had spent 2 generations in Babylon. Babylon is where they came from. Okay. It's a stretch to even imagine that one of them was old enough to remember being taken captive. During the excavation of the ruins of Solomon's temple, workmen discovered a subterranean vault. This is okay, Masonic and scriptural still, not empirical history. During the excavation, the ruins of Solomon's temple, workmen discovered a subterranean vault, a scroll in a subterranean vault, a scroll containing just the 5 books of Moses. Something that no living person had ever seen or read before. This event is the central theme of the Royal Arch degree of Freemasonry, the York Rite, we call it here, where the ritual officer portraying the workman is lowered by a rope into a dark chamber and retrieves a scroll and delivers the exciting news. I also found this scroll, but as I was unable to read its contents, I therefore gave another preconcerted signal and was drawn out of the vault, bringing the scroll with me. We then discovered from the first sentence that it contained the records of the most holy law, which had been promulgated by Moses at the foot of Mount Horeb. Grasping the importance of the discovery, Ezra, the scribe, had a high platform erected from which he could stand and speak to the multitudes. Now, just to review here, it was Ezra, maybe Nehemiah, who, when they were all captive still in Babylon, negotiated with the government of Babylon. First Cyrus the Great. And anyway, there had to be somebody that said, look, you want to deport all these people. You've got this land that's defended by no army or any organized government, just right down the street there. Let's do it, okay? I'll take them. I'll convince them that they all belong together, because there was a whole assortment of different migrants, if you will, slaves, if you will, of Babylon, from at least a dozen different areas all over the place. Okay, they all had little different language. They all had different customs and everything. So, look, I can convince them all they're one kind of people, and just give us that territory, and I'll take them there. I'll convince them. Nobody remembers where they came from 2 generations ago. It's just, they don't. I can do it. It'll be peaceful. It'll be okay. Okay. How is he going to convince them, though, that they're one people? How is he going to keep up even after they move, how is he going to keep it up and unify them and give them a cultural identity? Grasping the importance of the discovery, Ezra the scribe had a high platform erected from which he could stand and speak to the multitudes. He caused all who had returned from Babylon to be assembled before him, and he announced that the lost book of the law had been rediscovered, and he proceeded to read aloud for all of them to hear the 5 books of Moses. Now, this story is in the Bible. Okay, he did this. The 5 books of Moses. He read it all to them from this big platform. There must have been porta potties and things. It took a long time. Pizza must have been delivered. In one of the most dramatic and poignant scenes of the Old Testament, the children of Israel hear for the first time. I'm going to say that again. They hear for the first time the actual words of God from God's own book. They hear for the first time who they are and where they came from. They hear why they're God's chosen people. They hear that they are the descendants of Adam and Eve, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Israel. They hear for the first time the story of Joseph and their bondage in Egypt, of Moses and the Exodus, a story that each of them can identify with because they've just come out of bondage in Babylon. They grumbled, "Oh yeah, history repeats itself." They learn of their wanderings in the wilderness, how Moses gave them God's laws and the forms of sacrificial worship. They hear why God loves them and has given them this land. And because they are the descendants of Isaac and Jacob, Israel, and they hear why God hates the unhappy and resentful locals because they are descendants of Ishmael and Esau. Esau, a gross and hairy man who traded his birthright and any future claim to the land to Jacob, Israel, for a bowl of lentil soup. They hear for the first time that story. After Ezra's reading of the Pentateuch, the people became united in spirit and purpose. The new temple was built, and a particular tribe was chosen from among them to be a priest class. The laws of Moses were instituted and enforced. The sacrifices, practices, traditions of the old religion were resumed, and the people regained their spiritual identity. Ironically, this most dramatic and poignant biblical scene is rarely the subject of sermons. I never heard of it in Methodist pulpits, and never, to my knowledge, the subject of motion pictures. It would be a great one. Masonry, on the other hand, makes her members think about it a lot. But it's at this point in time, approximately 539 BC. Okay, 500 BC. Now remember, the story of Moses was supposed to have taken place 1200 BC. But it's here at 539 BC when historical and critical scholarly evidence confirms that Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon and began to deport and resettle descendants of Nebuchadnezzar's foreign captives. That empirical history starts to hint of the presence of a Jewish people whose center of worship is a temple in Jerusalem. Prior to this, however, there is silence concerning the children of Israel. Our only evidence of Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Jacob, Israel, Esau, Joseph, and the Egyptian captivity, Moses and the Exodus and wanderings, only evidence for Joshua and the conquest of Palestine, only evidence of the kingdoms of Saul, David, Solomon, the only evidence for all of that is the Bible. And in this case, the Bible is demonstrably unreliable history. That is my rant for today. Don't get me wrong, okay? I believe it's certainly possible that in the future, something major will be unearthed to give more empirical, historic validity to some of these Bible stories. They may find the porta potties of Ezra's talk. But currently, there really isn't much, if anything, to go on. That we are dealing with myths and traditions that, when taken in a spiritual context, are sacred, are wonderful, and are spiritual realities. But no matter what your creed or beliefs are, spiritual realities and historic realities needn't support each other. Certainly not to the extent that you blow somebody's brains out or kill their children. At least that's my 2 cents worth this morning. Take it for what it's worth. Don't hold it against me if you are passionately invested in that dream. Because it's all a dream. It's all in your head. We dream we are alive, and we dream we are dead. We dream of hell and heaven above. So why don't we just dream that we're in love? Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.